continuously the program flinttalk.com on your computers, and so if you miss it here or tomorrow night, or you can't stay up that late and you want to see it, it'll be on your computer at flinttalk.com. But anyway, we got quite a few things to talk about tonight. Obviously, much of our attention tonight will concern the federal jury conviction this past week of City of Burton Public Works Director Charles Abbey on 2 counts of bribery and 1 of extortion. Now, Mr. Abbey, Mayor Charles Smiley's closest confidant, was convicted of taking a lot free of charge from land developer Blake Rizzo to help Rizzo navigate his land developments through the maze of the City of Burton's bureaucracy, and in particular Rizzo's controversial subdivision known as Pebble Creek, and we'll hear a lot about that tonight. Now, we want to revisit the totality of Rizzo, Abbey, Smiley's, and others' participation in the ripoff of the Burton taxpayers for as much as maybe $1 million. And we're still counting. Now, however, before we conjure up our thoughts and our many observations about the Burton matter, we want to tie down a few loose ends from last week's program. In particular, the story of the Siamese cat bite case, which resulted in a $122,000 Genesee County jury award. You remember, I'm sure you saw the headlines. There it is. Youch, Siamese cat bite worth $122,000. And here's a little bit of what, give you an idea what it's about. It says, starts the story, it's Dateline Flushing. A sniper bullet in Vietnam was nothing compared to the bite of his sister's Siamese cat. A Genesee County jury on Friday gave a former Marine from Flushing $122,400 for an injury he sustained when his sister's cat bit him on the hand in March 2004. Michael Sabo, 57, of Flushing, had just taken a barbecue grill to his sister's when her cat, Randy, let out a screech and bit him, said Sabo's attorney, Tom Papps. This was a Siamese seal point, says Papps. They're the pit bulls of cats. Well, anyway, we talked to Attorney Papps last week on this, and asked him for the explanation that I'm sure most people wonder about, is how can a cat bite result in a $122,000 judgment? Here's the interview with him. Papps, who is a well-known trial attorney here in Genesee County, and he just completed a case in which a man became seriously ill because of a cat bite. And it was in today's, which is Saturday's Point Journal, which is the Siamese cat bite worth $122,000. Now, some people may think that's over the top on a cat bite, but can you tell us what that case was about?
Oh, sure. I was proud to represent Michael Sabo. He's a combat Marine who was shot by the enemy in Vietnam and through the ankle with a rifle, and spent a lot of time in the hospital, was in severe pain there. And he said the pain that he went through with this cat bite was worse than that. Worse than that. What happened was, normally a cat bite, big deal, and that's how he viewed it too. He thought, it's not a problem. He tried to wash out with peroxide, but he got infected. And when it got infected, his arm swelled up like a balloon. The eyewitnesses said his arm looked like the Incredible Hulk's arm, and his fingers looked like hot dogs that plumped. He couldn't move them at all. And there were streaks showing infection going towards his heart They thought he was going to die. His sisters thought he was going to die. They moved up there to be with him because they thought any minute he could go. He spent over 2 weeks in a hospital. Doctors would be coming and saying, look at this. Nobody had seen anything like that before. And thank goodness they saved his life and they saved his arm. But he incurred $21,000 in medical expenses. He works with his hands. He's got a handyman business, and he lost $11,500 in wages. And it was his sister who owned the cat that came to him and said, Mike, it's not your fault. Sue me. The cat bit 2 people before you. Sue me. In fact, she drove him to his first attorney's office in Saginaw and told the attorney, the cat bit 2 people before, sue me. And then the attorneys up there sued. And after the lawsuit started, she changed her story. She said, no, this cat's never bitten anyone before. And her sister, who's a very religious person, Suzanne, said, why are you doing this to Mike? Why did you tell him to sue you and then you change your story such? And she said, I've been threatened. I've been threatened that if we lose this case, my cat will have to be put to sleep. And she loves her cat. Its name's Randy. It's a Siamese seal point, and she named it after her dead husband. And someone on their side found a weak spot in her, and they pushed, and she got scared. I think they squeezed her like you'd squeeze an orange, and they were about to throw her away like the peel.
Did she ever tell you who threatened her?
Yes, she did. She told her sister, the evidence showed, that her attorney threatened her. But on a stand during open trial in front of the jury, she said it wasn't my attorney who threatened me, it was my insurance agent who said that if I lose, the cat will have to be put to sleep, or I'll never get insurance again, I'll never be able to insure my house against fire loss. And I thought, frankly, that was despicable, that they would resort to that, that it would get that low to threaten a woman and to threaten killing a cat she loved that she named after her husband just to win a case. I thought that's one of the most despicable things I've seen in 29 years as a trial attorney.
Now, I know you brought this to the attention of the jury. What was your position on that?
My position that it's despicable. In an American courtroom with a flag there and a judge in a robe making sure everyone swears an oath to tell the truth, and she comes in here and says on a stand, I've been threatened. I've been threatened that they'll put the cat to sleep, if I lose this case. I mean, and I think the jury correctly assumed that what type of credence can you put in the testimony of a witness who admits she's being threatened, with her beloved cat being killed. I think story number 1 was the true story, and that's what the jury believed, that it had bit people before and that he should recover because it had bit people before and he did nothing wrong. And that's exactly what they found. They weren't out long at all. Less than an hour, really. And I think they ate lunch during that time, too.
Well, I think you can see that there was some serious ramifications from a cat bite, and obviously you have to recognize that could happen to you if you're not careful. But the interesting part about this thing is that before Sabo went to the attorney, listen what it says. Sabo initially tried to get his sister's Farm Bureau insurance homeowners policy to cover the cost of the bite. But when the company refused, Pap said he had no other choice but to take the matter to court. Now, I'm sure they wish they had dealt with Sabo, because you don't want to be dealing with somebody as experienced and knowledgeable and with so much courtroom experience as Tom Pabst, but they did, and this is the result. And that's what happens when you don't take care of the matter. And the insurance company didn't. They did all the wrong things. And they ended up taking on Pabst and lost $122,000. Last Thursday, a federal jury found the City of Burton Department of Public Works director and the confidant of Burton Mayor Smiley, guilty of bribery and extortion. You know, the case revolved around the land developers, Blake Rizzo's allegations that he paid a bribe to Abbey to get his controversial land development project through the Burton bureaucracy without any real governmental scrutiny or interference. The project that was most often alluded to at the trial as the main source of the bribe and the payoff was Rizzo's Pebble Creek subdivision. Now, according to the proofs in the case, Rizzo received for this lot a $324,000 payoff, kind of as a first installment payment on his bribe. Now, I'll get into that in just a moment, but keep in mind, Rizzo was paid supposedly this amount of money to manage his own project, and that's unheard of. Unheard of. The city is supposed to be out there checking it. But they gave it to Rizzo and let him do it and paid him for it. His own project. Now, the vehicle of the management concept was to protect and try to hide the payoffs for the bribe to Abbey and others because Rizzo was in charge of it. That was a heck of a deal for all those people. This is procedure that was never used before in Burton and never used since. And I'm going to tell you why it was used on this occasion. You see, you have to understand a developer in a subdivision like this, he makes his profit on the sale of the lots in the subdivision and the construction of the homes if he does that. He doesn't need a management fee. He does where his profit is. But he needed the management fee for something else, and we'll get to that in a moment. Not only the management fee, but a little more than that, maybe up as much as $750,000 that he got, that he shouldn't have got. You know, interesting thing here is if I can find it here, here's what, talk about corruption. Here's what U.S. Attorney Robert Havlin said. He said, according to the Journal, Havlin talked about the bribery accusation against the mayor, not against Abbey alone, but against the mayor. Because Rizzo said he paid him over $20,000 a year, gave him trips down to Florida, California, Las Vegas, rather. And this was testified to in this trial. So the mayor was accused in the trial also, but he wasn't on trial at this time. But like I say, Havlin talked about the bribery accusation against the mayor as if they were facts. He can't do that as a lawyer unless, he can't make it up. He obviously believes it. Like I think many people out there in the community now believe it. You know, here we have Rizzo's sworn statement. Look at this here. He says in his sworn statement, starts on page 122, that he gave under oath, and that the FBI is aware of. And the deal was, if he told any lies in the sworn statement, which was about 190 pages, he'd be prosecuted for the crimes that they were going to give him a break on. And he's never been prosecuted on it. In 3 years, he's worked with the FBI. Obviously, FBI and everybody else involved in that statement believes it to be true. Otherwise, Rizzo had been charged. And they have ways of checking these things out. They could have given him a lie detector test. They're not going to buy into this unless they've got some evidence that what he's saying is the truth. But here's what I think is interesting. He says in this sworn statement, he says, with regard to the councilman, we've got Santelli. In other words, he testified in this statement that he had given Santelli $5,000 as a bribe because Santelli said he needed the money to pay for some losses in the stock market. And it says, and you were thinking about who else you might have given money to. This is the questioner from the prosecutor's office making that statement. Well, I gave a little bit of money to everybody there, everybody but Lori Tennant, and I haven't given Charlie Cass anyone, but I have before. And then it goes on to say, was it a campaign contribution referring to Cross? Yes, I gave him cash. You gave Charlie Cross, yes, $500, $600, you can't remember. When was that? Not the last time we ran, but the time before, so it was back in the 95 race or something. All right, with regard to anybody in the election cycle, you said you gave money to Smiley. Anybody else in this election cycle? Answer, yes, Smiley, this is Rizzo's answer. I believe I wrote a check to Jamie Curtis, and he talked about that. And it could have been a legitimate campaign contribution to both Cross and Curtis. And it says, has anybody else, have you ever given any loans or money to any other person, council person, not outside of this campaign activity, but in terms of money paid to any other public official in the city of Burton? Answer, this year? Question, at any time. Answer, ever? Question, yes. Answer, my whole life, you want me to name every single person I gave money to? Question, that's a public official in the city of Burton. Answer, is or was? Question, is or was, whatever. Answer, well, you could probably say everybody, and I guess I'll exclude Tennant, and that's about it. So Tennant, he didn't pay Tennant anything, ever. And she was the thorn in the side throughout this whole thing. Now, when you consider what Havlin has said, I bet Smiley and his city of Burton comrades are shaking on their boots after what I just read to you about Havlin. I mean, they got to figure they may be indicted. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about Majors who testified, which was what he testified to, what was kind of a surprise to Havlin. Is it true that maybe he testified differently in the grand jury because he said he went to the grand jury or talked to the FBI? And if you lie to the FBI, it's just like lying in a grand jury. It's a 5-year felony. So what did Major say that was different, if there was a difference? Could he be looking at being charged? What about LeDuc? The same thing. Smiley. I don't think Smiley's been called in simply because he is the target. But all these people have got to be concerned now because, they were in there trying to do their best to help Abby out. And I think one of the reasons is Abby knows something about them all. They want to help him. They don't want him convicted because if he turns state's evidence, they got some problems. The evidence in Abby's federal case clearly established his guilt, and as one of the potentially key witnesses to bring down Smiley. In other words, if he testifies and cooperates with the feds, he may not go to prison. That's a pretty good incentive. You know, Smiley, I'm sure, has been well aware of his precarious position in light of what Abby could bring to the table to help himself. In this case, by being convicted and getting ready to be sentenced. As a result, Smiley has done everything possible to ingratiate himself with Abby since the feds indicted him. You know, he kept him on a job and paid him in full. He arranged to pay for his defense attorney. At every opportunity, Smiley touted Abby's innocence in the face of this incriminating facts against Abby. Now I'm going to show you a recent attempt by Smiley to send a love letter to Abby to hold a fort and keep Smiley's involvement in Burton corruption secret. Here's that tape. Can you play that, please?
Burton City official has been found guilty on all 3 federal charges: conspiracy, bribery, and extortion. Good evening. I'm Bill Harris.
And I'm Angie Hendershot. After a week and a half in the courtroom, a jury has just found Charles Abbey guilty of trading political favors for a free lot from a Burton developer. Tara Nasher has been following the story since the investigation started 3 years ago. She joins us now live from U.S. District Court in Flint. Tara? Angie, Charles Abbey and his family and friends who have packed this federal courthouse every single day since the trial began erupted into tears when that guilty verdict was read. This trial wraps up an investigation, as you said, that goes back to 2003 and testimony from the U.S. Attorney's key witness, Blake Rizzo. Blake Rizzo, the Burton developer, claimed he bribed Charles Abbey with a free lot in his subdivision in exchange for political favors. Through testimony, the government showed how Abbey used his position as city administrator to obtain the lot. In exchange, Abbey helped Rizzo receive favorable treatment on his upcoming building projects like Pebble Creek. The prosecution showed Rizzo received a total of $324,000 from the city of Burton for managing his own subdivision, something the prosecution claimed Abbey made happen. The defense called witnesses that testified Abbey never influenced anyone. They also called multiple witnesses to show Rizzo never wanted a lot he gave Abbey that was surrounded by power lines. But it wasn't enough to convince this jury. After 8 hours of deliberations, they found him guilty. The family of Charles Abbey is outraged. He was found guilty on all 3 counts.
I hope these jurors can sleep at night, knowing that they put an innocent man behind bars. Because we know that Mr. Rizzo lied about everything, and that Charles was innocent. We know that. That's all I can say. It's just, it's just bad that kind of criminal could get out, and my husband didn't do a thing wrong. It's terrible. I don't know how this justice system even works.
The family is referring to the fact that back in 2003, Blake Rizzo, as we mentioned, the government's key witness, made a deal with the Genesee County prosecutor at the time, Ed Bush. Now, Rizzo, who was facing 4 felonies for crimes he committed, only had to plead to 2 misdemeanors if he provided Prosecutor Bush with evidence and testimony against several Genesee County officials. Rizzo claims he paid off for political favors. Obviously, you can see from that video, the family is very emotional. We did see Charles Abbey right after, but because we can't bring our cameras into the courtroom, we couldn't question him. We were told he slipped out the back door. But his family tells us he is very upset, disappointed about the verdict. He is out on bond until he is sentenced. Again, Charles Abbey, he was found guilty on conspiracy, bribery, and extortion charges. That is the latest from downtown Flint. I'm Karen Asher for ABC.
Now, when you listen to this report by this Tara Asher, I thought she was going to cry. I mean, what a softball explanation of what happened here. I mean, this guy was convicted of a serious crime, of bribery, 2 counts of bribery and extortion. And she's out there talking about how bad the family feels, and they're outraged, and hey, we understand that, but tell us about the case. But anyway, she threw it in there, a little of the facts, but she also put in the defense about why maybe you shouldn't believe what the prosecution. That's just my opinion. It was just a soft soap story. Now, what you must keep in mind is this, and I think Channel 12 had an obligation to tell the public this. Taryn Asher lives in the subdivision with Smiley, or not with Smiley, with Abby and with Rizzo. They live in the same subdivision, Maplewood Meadows. That's the same subdivision that the lot's involved. They know each other. They're friends. And they got her covering the case? At least they should, I think 12 should have made that clear to the public, to the viewers, that, maybe she's a little bit biased in her reporting on this case, because that story was, I think, an outrage, the way they put it in. But, Smiley, there's so much more in this case, and let me see that interview with Smiley. Can you play that at Channel 12? This was after the conviction, the following day. And keep in mind, Channel 12 is the only station that these people from Burton will talk to, because they get a soft run on it. But anyway, can you play that tape of the interview with 12 and Smiley?
City official convicted of federal charges of conspiracy, robbery, and extortion has just resigned as Department of Public Works Director.
That's according to Burton's mayor, who spoke exclusively to ABC 12 today about his friend and co-worker being found guilty. Good evening, I'm Angie Hendershot.
And I'm Bill Harris. After a week-and-a-half-long trial, the prosecution convinced the jurors City Administrator Charles Abbey traded political favors for free land for Burton developer Blake Rizzo. Taryn Asher joins us live with reaction. The story you'll only see on ABC 12 this Friday. Karen?
Bill, Burton's mayor Charles Smiley says he still cannot believe Charles Abbey was found guilty, and he knows there's a possibility the government could come after him next.
Mr. Abbey was innocent. I could have cleared up anything that they would have asked. I mean, that proffer is full of lies.
Burton Mayor Charles Abbey is referring to this proffer agreement. In it, developer Blake Rizzo, who was facing 4 felonies at the time, claimed he paid off Genesee County officials for public favors. During the trial, the prosecution focused on Rizzo's involvement with Mayor Smiley and Charles Abbey, who a jury found guilty. Advised by the defense, Abbey and Smiley didn't testify.
Abbey was able to get his case on. Had I been able to testify, maybe I could have cleared up some of the lies that were told, and there were some serious lies.
Smiley says yes, Rizzo gave Abbey a free lot in his subdivision, but he never asked for it or did anything in return.
An arrangement that him and Blake made had no strings attached to the city of Burton. None whatsoever. And Blake committed that in the trial. He said it was a gift. I mean, it really had nothing to do with the city of Burton. Abbey didn't have the authority to influence anybody.
The prosecution claimed Abbey used his position as city administrator to conceal Rizzo's ownership of the subdivision Pebble Creek. And once it was approved by city council, Abbey and Smiley made sure Rizzo was paid a total of $324,000 to manage his own subdivision.
Mr. Abbey had nothing to do with Mr. Rizzo and that special suspect in the payment of that, the way that was handled. Did you? No, not a bit. Not a bit.
Since Rizzo claimed he bribed several Genesee County officials, including Mayor Smiley, he says there's a chance the government could come after him next.
I suppose the moves can be next based on what I've seen. I don't understand why I was such a focus point again. I don't know. If I'm next, I'm next.
And we're told there's a chance Abbey could appeal. He faces up to 20 years in prison, but Assistant U.S. Attorney tells us when sentencing guidelines are implemented, Abbey will likely face only up to 2 years in prison. Live in the newsroom, Tara Nasher.
Well, liar, pants on fire. If you can believe that. Now, here's the headlines in the Journal. Burton eyes turned the mayor. No kidding. Now, the interesting thing here is I want you to remember this. Abbey or Smiley talks about the land being a gift. It was given to him. And you'll see, Abbey talks about the fact that he paid $22,000 for it. Didn't these guys get their messages together here? They're working together. And then he says, well, if I was called as a witness, I could have cleared all this up. Hey, Abbey could have called him. What's he trying to pull? He's trying to say something now outside of the jury room where he wouldn't be cross-examined and he wouldn't be under oath, saying things like that. I could have cleared it up. It's all a bunch of lies. Well, why didn't he get on the stand? Why didn't the defense call him? It isn't like they're not associated, these two. So, and then he says Abbey's had nothing to do with this. Do you remember the testimony? It was reported in the Journal about Major saying that Abbey brought Rizzo to him and said Mr. Rizzo is the real owner, not Mr. I forget the fellow's name, OSHA, whose name was on the deed to hide Rizzo's involvement. Now, what's that tell you about a guy like Abbey that would participate? That right off the bat tells you something about him. He's hiding these facts from the public and from the council. And he goes to Majors and says, hey, we want to talk to you about the setting up a district, assessment district, an infrastructure type assessment district. But don't tell anybody that Rizzo's the guy behind this, because we would get a lot of heat and a lot of trouble. Well, what did that tell you right off the bat about Abbey? He's had something to do with this. Now, we add the fact that he was present during at least 7 meetings, according to the attorney representing the city, a guy named Hamilton. He was present at least on 7 of those meetings, because his name is in the billing from the attorney as being one of the parties in the meeting. So, for Smiley to say that, for all these people who marched to the stand, the little dukes and the majors saying, well, he wasn't involved, they must have thought we didn't have the records, or they didn't check the records. This is how ridiculous this is. And Smiley says he had nothing to do with Pebble Creek. This is the largest land development ever in the city of Burton. $4 million of bond money was issued for this. You got to ask, what's that all about? Smiley wasn't involved? Come on. He doesn't want to be involved because he knew what was going to be happening. And you can see Smiley's message to Abbey, good guy, he's innocent, is constantly, in my opinion, Smiley was in a panic mode, and is in a panic mode, and is trying everything to prevent Abbey from getting convicted, and did try everything he could, because if Abbey is convicted, Smiley would lose all his leverage to keep Abby quiet. I'm sure by the time Abby's family is telling him his obligation is to his family first, and not Smiley, you know, whether Abby is smart enough to realize that, only time will tell. But that's why Smiley was a little concerned about this, because his hammer was acquittal, and he could keep him on the payroll and do all these things for him. But the facts were so obvious that this is what happened here. Now, the $324,000 kickback, you know, I've already mentioned that. Then Abby and others, and the Smileys and the Dukes and the Rizzos and the Abby's created, was only part, in my opinion, of the payoffs. The bigger part amounted to ripping off the taxpayers to up to $750,000 to $1 million. Let me tell you, in my opinion, what this was all about and how the scam went down. According to Rizzo in his sworn statement, that, you know, it's been verified by the FBI. So what Rizzo's saying has the support of the feds and everything else because they checked it out, and he's telling the truth because he's never been charged. And we have his statement, you know, his proffer where he describes this, and other evidence we've acquired over a period of 3 years. We've been talking about this for 3 years and telling you these facts. For 3 years, nothing new happened at this trial we haven't already told you on this program. But here's what happened here. Rizzo owed a contractor on a previous land development, either in Burton or Grand Blanc or wherever, $1 million that Rizzo couldn't pay. The contractor reminded Rizzo and the Burton city officials, that's Smiley, Abby, the Duke, and others, that they had assumed or assured the contractor here, if Rizzo couldn't pay the IOU on the prior development that he owed this contractor money on, they, in effect, the city of Burton officials, guaranteed Rizzo's debt. When the contractor couldn't get his $750,000 million owed him by Rizzo from the prior land development, the contractor went to Smiley and his friends and told them to come up with $1 million, or he'd blow the whistle on all of their wrongdoing. At this point, Rizzo, Smiley, Abby concocted this deal that, with Pebble Creek subdivision ready to start work on, and that was the vehicle they used, they would get Burton, the city of Burton, the Burton officials would float a $4 million bond issue with the full faith and credit of the city of Burton. The taxpayers are paying this. They would get this $4 million to install the infrastructure for Pebble Creek. Now, the procedure is permitted under the law. Not that ripping off the taxpayers, but if you need money to front up for infrastructure for the contractor who will then pay it back when he starts selling the lots, you can do that. It's an attempt to move a city ahead if they want to put some subdivisions in. But again, as I say, the landowner promises to pay it back. You know, on its face, as I say, it looks legitimate, but here's how the scam comes into play, which lost not only a $324,000 gift to Rizzo, to phantom manage his Pebble Creek project, but also another $500,000 to $750,000 to pay off his debt owed to the contractor on that previous project that the city officials guaranteed, which they had no really legal right to do. They didn't have any right to do that. It was part of the deal. Everybody was in this thing. We'll take care of Rizzo. Rizzo takes care of us. Now, to make the scam go, they awarded the no-bid contract to this contractor that Rizzo owed the money to. No bid. Now here's kind of the con. Here's how it went down. The cost of the infrastructure for Pebble Creek, for which the $4 million had been issued, would probably only cost $2,300,000. And the $4 million was over that. But this was done to pay Rizzo's debt. But how did they get this money that was in the bonds to the contractor without exposing the ripoff of the Burton taxpayers? You know, taxpayers presently are paying off that $4 million right now. Now, how they do it, you know, of course, this is why the Burton officials gave the infrastructure job to the contractors who was owed the money by Rizzo without a bid. He could charge whatever he wanted to. There was no oversight by the city because the officials were part of the scam. This cozy relationship allowed the contractors to overcharge the city for $750,000, which was the money that was given to Rizzo's contractors to pay his debt. The same contractor he owed was doing this job on a no bid. Anything he submits, he got. That's where they made up the difference of what Rizzo owed. Nobody was overseeing it. Rizzo was. He was overseeing it to make sure that they had enough money being requested out of the bonds by the contractor to pay that contractor back his debt. No, the contractor was out for it. He was getting his money back. The great tragedy here, obviously, is that, you know, for the taxpayers of Burton, they're paying it. They're paying Rizzo's debt off. They have no responsibility for it. You know, as I say, the scam was based on overseeing, no one overseeing Rizzo or anybody operating that, or putting together that Pebble Creek thing. But anyway, the question is whether or not there was any charges going to be made against Smiley. But here's an interview by again the Asher woman who lives with these people, friends of theirs. Here's her softball interview of Abbey after the trial and what he had to say. And it's interesting to know, they say, we just had the exclusive. No kidding. That's because, as you'll see, they ask a lot of softball questions. Can you play that, please?
Safest place in bad weather.
They entrusted me to do that.
He served the city of Burton for 26 years. Now Charles Abbey has resigned his position as the city administrator and director of public works director after he is found guilty of conspiracy, bribery, and extortion. Good evening. I'm Angie Hendershot.
And I'm Bill Harris. For the first time since the jury handed down the guilty verdicts in federal court last week, Charles Abbey is talking and only to ABC 12. ABC 12's Tara Nasher joining us now live from the newsroom with more on her exclusive interview. Tara?
Abbey says hindsight is 20/20. If he had to do it all over again, from buying a lot from developer Blake Rizzo to not taking the stand in the federal trial against him, Abbey says he would do it all differently.
I almost passed out. I honestly believed from the bottom of my heart that I was going to be acquitted.
Reality has finally set in for Charles Abbey, but he says the regret has been there from the beginning.
I could have used better judgment. I could have probably thought things through a little better, but by no means I know what's going through Mr. Rizzo's mind.
During the trial, Burton developer Blake Rizzo testified he bribed Abbey with this free lot in his Maplewood Meadows subdivision, and both of them covered it up by transferring the lot to Rizzo's assistant. But Abbey says he bought the lot from Rizzo through a quick claim deed and paid nearly $23,000 in liens and assessments.
They painted a broad brush that there's corruption. If that's happening, I surely don't know about it. I bought a lot one time, and now I'll have to pay for that decision.
In return, the prosecution claimed Abbey orchestrated Rizzo's ownership of the subdivision Pebble Creek. And once it was approved by City Council, Abbey made sure Rizzo was paid a total of $324,000 to manage his own subdivision.
I don't have authority to pay that money. I had no authority to intercede on his behalf in that area. I was a personnel director.
Abbey says he wishes now he would have testified, clearing up the truth that he claims became twisted with the prosecution's case. For example, the extravagant trips Rizzo claims he took with Abbey and Burton Mayor Charles Smiley.
They think this much truth to something, and then before long it's this big. Did I go to fishing? Yes, I did. Did I pay? Yes, I did.
Abbey says Rizzo lied about that and many other things on the stand, which has now cost him his career. At one point, Abbey says the government offered him a plea deal, one in good conscience he couldn't accept.
I'll admit to not using good judgment. I'll admit to wishing I was smarter, but I have a hard time admitting to a crime that I don't believe I committed. And if I did commit a crime, I surely didn't do it willingly and knowingly.
Abbey is appealing the verdict, mainly, he says, for his wife and 5 children, who, if he goes to prison, will be left behind facing a legacy of lies.
But I'm going to fight it because I have to fight it. My whole life's on the line here.
He'll be sentenced June 27th. Tomorrow, hear more from Charles Abbey, including what he wants the mayor to do in the wake of this verdict. Live in the newsroom.
And I can't wait to see what he wants the mayor to do. Keep fighting, Mayor. Keep fighting. But, you know, again, I'm critical of that interview because the questions weren't asked. It should have been asked by a reporter that is trying to get at the truth, that is confronting the person now who's giving his little after-the-fact speech with no contesting of what he's saying. For example, you got to ask, well, Mr. Abbey, you say you got a quitclaim deed, but you claim you paid $22,000 for the lot? Hey, anybody knows if you're paying for it, why are you taking a quitclaim deed? That's a deed that says I'm giving you everything I own, and if I don't own anything, you're out of it. A warranty deed, if you're paying for it, says I'm warned that I own the property, that all the construction people and subcontractors have been paid. I mean, it's just common sense. You'd ask for a warranty deed if you paid the money. And keep in mind, he's saying he paid the money and he paid for it. And he says it was a gift. These guys should get their stories together here. And then you have to ask, if the sale was for real and legitimate, why run it through a straw man to hide Rizzo's conveyance to Abby? If it's legitimate, you can show it. You just have a check or whatever it is, you paid for it, you can buy the property legitimately, but why run it through a straw man if it's legitimate? Because it wasn't legitimate. What was he trying to hide if it's a legal deal? And why did Abby sign a state tax certificate required by state law whenever a sale of property is concluded and indicating the price, or if you pay under $100 for it, you say so? He stated in his in the tax certificate he paid less than $100 for the lot, which confirms what Rizzo's saying. You can't have it both ways. He either paid $22,000 or less than $100. He swore in the state tax certificate he paid less than $100 for the lot. As I said, which supports Rizzo's testimony that the property was a bribe and Abby paid nothing for it. And then, why did he try to give the jury the impression he had nothing to do with the Pebble Beach subdivision? When, as Jeff Majors, former Public Works Director, testified, Abby came to him, Majors, with Rizzo, and told Major Rizzo was the real owner of Pebble Creek subdivision, but to keep it secret. Now, he does that. He doesn't get on the stand. He says, I wish I testified. If he got on the stand, he wouldn't have been murdered with these questions. He couldn't answer them. That's why he wasn't on the stand. And then here's another one. You have to say, also, why would he try to leave the impression that he had no involvement when he, Abby, according to the city attorney's own records, that he sat in at least 7 of the Pebble Creek meetings when the project was being discussed. And finally, this question. The most telltale sign of Abby's misrepresentation is where he double talks about paying the $20,000 fee, and he adds there for lien and assessment, trying to give the impression that he was paying for the lot when he was paying for the assessments. The cost of the lien and the assessments was what every purchaser of a lot in that subdivision paid for. That's the way you do it. The result is that the lot was not paid for by the $22,000 for the liens and assessments. That's separate. He got the lot, which is worth $22,000 for nothing. And he doesn't answer that question. He tries to give the impression he paid for it with the assessments. Now, the $22,000 additional payouts for these assessments were, bottom line, in addition to the price of the lot. Now, here's some testimony, what I'm talking about here, about these lots. Under questioning by Haviland, Amy Price, the first American insurance title company, confirmed that the house lots for which she did the paperwork sold from $16,000 to $21,000, and the buyers had to foot the bill for the $18,000 special assessment that paid for the infrastructure improvements. Everybody had to pay that. So when he says he paid that and that was his payment for buying the lot, it's beyond that. It's beyond the payment for the lot. The lot was a gift. Now, the Journal came out with an editorial today. Here's what it said. It says, and I think it sums up pretty good what's going on here. Corrupt client. Burton Mayor Smiley allowed atmosphere for wrongdoing. Here's what it reads. Even before Burton Mayor Charles Smiley's friend and aide was convicted last week of bribery and extortion, trial testimony in the mayor's own statements had shown this administration guilty of gross impropriety. Can there be any reasonable doubt that developer Blake Rizzo, who profited immensely from business dealing with the city, should not have bought plane tickets to Florida and Las Vegas for Smiley and Florida tickets for Public Works Director Charles Abbey, and even accepting Smiley's claim that he reimbursed Rizzo? Keep in mind, there's no evidence he did it, just his word. Where's the check he reimbursed him with? Where's the records of that? Never show. And then the Journal goes on, its editorial says, and then there was the bizarre scene described in federal court testimony of Smiley waiting on a street corner to accept an envelope of cash from Rizzo's secretary. It does not matter whether the $300 handed over helped a woman pay a utility bill, or if it was part of a bill or a bail money for or bail money to spring one of Rizzo's mayor's relatives from jail. Rizzo's secretary should have been able to give such damning evidence, because the mayor should have had the ethics and the good sense not to solicit financial favors from someone so dependent on the city's goodwill. While the aforementioned creates an unalienable era of corruption, or an undeniable era of corruption in Burton City Hall, Abbey's conviction and possible prison sentence stems from another transgression: his acceptance of a subdivision lot from Rizzo for free or greatly reduced price, allegedly for favorable treatment by the city. Whether or not Abbey's sentencing on June 27 ends this sordid saga, Smiley, at the very least, owes his constituents an apology for permitting a climate in which public roles and personal gain became intertwined. He can begin this contrition by ending this absurd claim that he's done nothing wrong. One of the first rules of serving in public office is to avoid even the appearance of conflict of interest. Fundamental to the image is for an elected official to maintain an arm's-length relationship with any party seeking government contracts or other approvals. Based on Abbey's conviction and other acknowledged entanglements involving Rizzo, Smiley administration is not a model to be followed. Pretty strong. A little sidelight to this. Lori Tennant, who was kind of the whipping boy, or in this case, whipping girl for Smiley and the people on the Burton Council when she was a member, she was the only one that was fighting against Smiley and his people. Went to all kinds of people, including, interestingly enough, the Journal, the editorial people, the editor, and told them what was going on there. And told them 2 years ago, 3 years ago, a year ago, kept telling them. And they blew her off, saying, oh, well, Smiley wouldn't do anything like that. The editor said, look, I'm on commissions with him, and he's a nice guy. He conned everybody, including the Journal, who should know better. But I'm glad they finally straightened it out with their editorial today. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more things happening with this case as we go down the road. And I hope Abby has enough sense to realize that he has a greater obligation to his family to avoid and try to avoid going to prison than going for 2 years. Take it from me. 2 years is a long time in jail. Speaking from personal experiences. But anyway, next week we'll probably have some more on this. And we'll be back, God willing. In the meantime, we'll be at the White Horse.